Well, good day, Bomber fans. Good night, Bomber fans. Late upload today, apologies. But yeah, big game this week. Essendon up against Sydney. Huge game for both these clubs. Really important match. I know the footy world probably won't be tuning into this one, but it's just a game that both these teams will want to be winning. So there's going to be plenty to talk about here today. Big preview for what is a big game for both these teams. Let's get into it after we go through the votes from the North Melbourne game. Okay, votes are pretty similar. We both obviously gave Merritt the full love. It would have been surprised if we didn't. Archibald Perkins got 2 from each of us. It gets a bit funkier from here. I gave 1 to Mason Redman. You guys gave 1 to Samuel Durham. Shout out to Archie Roberts, who was, a few votes away from him. It was tight there. The role player was also tight. I gave it to 7-seater Peter Wright, and you guys had it tied with Wright and Nate Caddy. The only reason Caddy edges him out is because he had 1 more regular vote. The overall tally, Merritt extends his lead. He has now got double the amount of votes of Durham in second place. Durham leads Reid, Caldwell and Wright. You've also got the injured Sam Draper, Xavier Dersma, Archie Perkins is now in the 10, and then McGrath and Martin rounded out. And that is the votes. By the way, after 7 games, we have 21 different players who have received votes this year, which shows how even it is after Zach Merritt, I guess. But yeah, keep up the good work. Okay, Essendon and Sydney, always a weird matchup, this one. You can always count on, these games just being, either strange or an absolute belter. Recent history suggests it'll probably be close. These games often are, and it'll probably be a Swans win. We've played some good games, but they have won 6 of the last 7. And, that was before they were in this weird run of form, I guess. We're actually ahead of them on the ladder, which is rare. We've won 4 and lost 3. They have won 3 and lost 5. Their most recent game was a really good win against the Giants. Our most recent win, we scraped over the line against the Roos, a team that the Swans absolutely demolished at Marvel. So even though we are ahead on the ladder, we've got more wins. We're actually, we're going in as the underdogs. The bookies have the Swans as the more likely victors, and I think that is probably fair, because right now, Essendon are beating the teams they should beat and losing to the better teams. That is why this game is really fascinating, because are the Swans better than Essendon? We're pretty consistent in our results and expectations, so this will tell us whether or not we are that bottom 6 or maybe even bottom 4 side that people think we are, or if we beat the Swans, maybe, go 5-3, maybe we're a bit better than what we think. I said last week that this run of 4 games, North, Swans, Dogs, Tigers, I think it's crucial for our season. The expectation is we win 2 from those 4, but if we manage a win against either the Swans or the Dogs in the next fortnight, I'd be over the moon. It would give us a chance to be 6-4 going into round 11 before a run of tougher games. Yeah, I think I'd really love to win one of these next 2 matches. It's going to be tough because both these teams are arguably better than us. But yeah, I guess the interesting thing about this game is that neither team is full strength. Both these teams have pretty bad injury lists, so it's going to be a really interesting game to see unfold. How do we beat the Swans? And how worried should we be about them despite their ladder position? Yeah, Sydney have been struggling this year. The odd thing is, they've been okay on the road. They beat the Dockers, they belted the Roos, but they're just dropping games at home. And I think maybe they'd look a bit better if they had won even just one of those SCG games that they've been losing. But, beaten by the Hawks, by the Lions, even by Port. And it's funny because, at their best, they've looked like a proper team that can contend. I guess they've struggled to fire under new coach Dean Cox. And, it just doesn't look like the team that made a grand final last year. Defensively, they're struggling to keep sides down, which is really rare for a Sydney team. Their depth has been exposed, and they're missing good players. That has to be said. But to be playing as poorly as they are after making a grand final with minimal changes to their side in the off-season, I just think the Swans have been found out and their new coach doesn't have the answers. As Dean Cox himself said, they've become a bit predictable. I reckon when I look back on Sydney teams in recent years, there's usually this feeling that you really, got to show up to get over the line against them. I feel like 90% of the time they've been sturdy, they're resilient, but at times this year, that Gold Coast game, they conceded 12 goals in a row. That is not the sign of a top 4 or even top 8 team. This Sydney side is 100% vulnerable, but then again, so are the Bombers. We've got a positive win-loss ledger, but aren't really firing. In fact, I'd say Sydney have probably played better footy than us, or at least at their best, they've played better footy, just with a tougher fixture. So what do we need to look out for in the game, and how should it be playing out if we're, I guess, winning or losing? I think we're probably going to have a lot of the footy, not necessarily in dangerous areas, but I think we will likely have our hands on it more than the Swans. It may even be a game played in our forward half. Even last year when the Swans smashed us at Marvel, we had more inside 50s, more footy in our forward half, more of the pill. But the Swans, yeah, I mean, they're probably just going to be defending more than attacking, and that's not a bad thing. That's usually how these types of games play out. But because we have the ball so much, the Swans will likely have a pretty sound system and structure down back. There will likely be numbers there, and really, I think it becomes about how well we defend their transition. Because the Swans, like Marvel, it's a quick ground to play on. At their best, they move the footy well from the defensive half. If we can stop that completely, if our forwards can, actually apply pressure, which they haven't been doing lately, then yeah, it probably goes a long way to winning the game. Because that, I reckon the contest is less relevant in a game like this. It doesn't mean it's not important. The way to get your hands on the pill is to win it tough. But the way Sydney have been playing lately, I'd almost back us in to win at right at the coalface where it matters. I think large parts of this game could be played on our terms on the outside. But also, I don't know if that's me reading too much into their, negative form, because at their very best, they have played some decent footy, and footy that we probably wouldn't be able to, stack up with. I think the game's probably going to be a pretty open one either way. I'm trying to think about if Sydney turn up at their worst and their best, what does it look like? And I think even if they're at their best, we're probably still, I guess, technically controlling the game in many aspects with, just how much of the footy we'll probably have. And I think, Sydney at their best will obviously kill us on the counter-attack. But if they're at their worst, there is chance that we beat them. Because, the best way to defend the footy is to not let your opponent have it. Or at least that's Brad Scott's philosophy, I guess. And look, I think right now we're not really playing like a team that can take any big scalps. The question is, are Sydney a big scalp? Are they going to turn up and are we going to have to really fight to get the win? Or is this going to be a similar game to Port Adelaide where, they're not at their best, we get them at a good time in the year? It's tough because, their game style's been there in patches. This Sydney team could really take advantage of us if they wanted, but we could take advantage of them too. Think about how tough we could make it for that key forward line, and just the forward line in general. They've got no one up there. We've actually been pretty sound lately down back too. And it is harder without Ridley, but this is a team we can contain, I reckon. And even if we're not scoring, hopefully make the game a low-scoring one, like we did with North Melbourne and Port Adelaide, and even West Coast, I guess, to an extent. And on the flip side, no Melican really brings 2-metre Peter into the game. That is a massive advantage for us in the air. The grunt in the midfield is going to be great, seeing our Rowbottom and Jordan go against Durham and Caldwell. All three lines are really hard to, I guess, predict a winner in, which makes the game really tough to predict a winner in. I do think it's pretty much as good as a 50-50. Maybe the SCG, it would be, a Swan, or it probably would be a Swans win, but at Marvel, I mean, yeah, there are some tough players in both teams that should make it really fun when it's locked in the middle. And then on the outside, who knows what's going to happen there? It's just about which team takes their chances. Yeah, I mean, really tough game to tip. I think it's pretty standard in how it's going to play out. It just really is about who's playing better footy on the day. And look, I think you're silly if you full on discount any team. This is going to be a game where star players really matter. When you have the amount of injuries to your team that both these teams do, it then turns to the best of the best, and whoever can really, grab the game by the horns and own it. Look at Merritt last week. He won the game for us against North Melbourne. You could say Chad Warner helped win the game against GWS for the Swans. I think the issue for me is after Zach Merritt, who's quite clearly the best player on the field, I think, for both teams, who after him on Essendon is going to own this game? Because I look at Merritt as the best. There are probably 5 or 6 Sydney players that are just amazing footballers after him that can do what he does as well. Chad Warner is an absolute star. Isaac Heaney wasn't far off a Brownlow last year. He's arguably better than Merritt, some would say. Nick Blakey, the Lizard, he's someone I'd really be worried about this weekend on Marvel. Even other guys we don't think of much. Off the top of my head, Dane Rampey's All-Australian. Brodie Grundy's All-Australian, going up against Todd Goldstein, who was close to death last week. They've got some really good players, the Swans, despite their injuries. Yes, they have some that maybe wouldn't get a game at the Bombers right now. That key forward situation is really odd. They're playing Aaron Francis and Joel Hamling up there. But it's still a really strong team at its best. And usually I talk about the lesser guys and how important they are in a game like this. You're only as good as your worst player type vibe. But I think there's a possibility where this game plays out pretty similarly to our game last week, where star players just matter. They are important. and the Swans have them in spades. I reckon if you take Merritt out of the game, it makes it really hard for Essendon. Unfortunately, that's just where we are. If you take Chad Warner out of the game, there are other players that can lift around him. I reckon this is a game that we can come back to on Monday after the coaches' votes have been released and see it all red and white. And if that's the case, if Sydney have the best 5 or 6 players on the field, then they've probably won the game. Team news before my prediction: we've got 3 players to replace. Harry Jones, Jordan Ridley, and Jade Gresham were all injured in that North game. Luckily, Jai Caldwell is going to return. That is a massive in. He is a very important player for us. Dylan Shield should also come back. Would he replace Elijah Sardis, who was poor? Probably not, given we've already made 3 changes. I think one of those guys could be the sub even. Lewis Hayes was rested in the VFL, so he may be coming into the side against Sydney, which would be his first game of AFL footy. And yes, it would be giving us a very tall key back line, but we've been waiting for this debut a while now. I'd just be keen to see what he can do at AFL level, to be honest. That's what this season is about for me. Yes, the Ridley injury sucks, but it would be great to see another debutant. So Lewis Hayes is definitely in the frame for that. As for Sydney, they have to replace Lewis Melican, who's been suspended for 3 weeks. That is a big loss. He goes out. I honestly think a Ford could come in, and maybe Hamling or Francis, Aaron Francis, by the way, could go back to defence. Maybe Hamling. I don't think anyone on the injury list is quite ready to return. I could be proven wrong tomorrow night. But yeah, I don't think they'd be changing too much to the side that broke that little losing streak they had going on. So I'm predicting just the forced changes for both teams. We will see though. If you want a live reaction to the teams on Thursday, by the way, head over to Bomber Banter. I'm going to try and hop on there again if I have time on the live stream. Even if I don't, it'll probably still be vibey over there anyway. Okay, prediction. I've been tossing it up a bit here. Look, I'm 7 from 7, so I don't want to get it wrong, which is probably why I've gone with Sydney. I was really tempted to tip the Bombers. I think we can win this game. I really wouldn't be surprised if we do win this game, and I would love to win one of these next 2 against the Swans or the Dogs, because it would mean we'd pretty much be even on our win-loss ledger come the just before the bye, or whenever the bye. Actually, don't know when the bye is. Sorry, don't know why I said that. But yeah, I've tipped Sydney. I just think they've got a bit too much quality on their list at the moment, even with injuries. And I know that if I tipped Essendon and we lost, I would be filthy with myself. I like to try and tip as a neutral. We see the best in the club, and we are always going to tip an upset if we think there's one on the cards. But if I was a neutral looking at these 2 teams, I just think the Swans are probably the better of the 2. I think the home ground advantage could matter, and definitely get out to the game if you can. We don't want a quiet stadium. We need, the crowd up and about for when the boys kick their goals, because, at times the North fans seemed a bit louder than us on Thursday night. So get out to the game if you can, and hopefully on Sunday we're celebrating and closer to the 8 than we would have thought. But yeah, really, really interesting game of footy, one that is very tough to predict. We'll see how it goes. Time will tell. We're either going to be happy or sad on Sunday. But yeah, leave your predictions down in the comments below. Let me know what you think. But that is all. Cheers for watching. Like if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. And as always, go Bombers.